Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Carly.
Hello.
Carly, do you like the enthusiasm I put in the name?
I love the enthusiasm.
It's better to have high energy than low energy. There's sometimes I like talk to people and it's like, yeah, and then I'm going to the store later and then I'm going to Disney World. And I'm like, you're going to Disney World. Like scream it from the rooftops. It's apparently a fun place.
Yeah, exclamation points are always welcome.
But when you get it in a text though, it seems like I'm getting yelled at a lot of the time.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Well, Carly, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I am a biology professor at Lenore-Rhine University, which is a liberal arts school in the mountains of Western North Carolina. I'm an animal physiologist, so I teach classes on animal physiology, teach a class on zoology. I also teach our non-majors, so people who aren't actually studying biology. And then I also do some research on top of that. I am particularly interested in sensory physiology. So how do animals sense their world? I'm working with the North Carolina Zoo on some welfare studies. And I'm also pretty involved with science communication. So taking all of my science training and translating it into something that is accessible and interesting to the general public.
Like joining onto a 23-year-old's podcast who's doing it out of a small room in his house that looks like he has an ISIS curtain behind him. That's awesome. I love it. Thank you for joining me. This is interesting though, because I've talked to plenty of like zookeepers, wildlife people, but I've never really talked to someone who's focused on the movement of like animals. I've had a scientist on here who's a biomechanical engineer who studies like
Cool.
just the movement in general, especially when it comes to aging. Like a lot of people, like, standing straight up, they always say have great posture and stuff like that. You really don't know what plays an effect. Same thing with animals too. What I always find is pretty interesting is that a cat can jump out of like a 10-story building and land on its feet and then just run off. And it's like, I don't understand how that works, but that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. I've done a lot of work with movement, particularly in squid. So my doctorate work was understanding a little better how squid move and how they escape predators. So how they do really fast jets away from an oncoming predator.
Isn't there like old depictions of like giant squids fighting whales? I know that sounds
Mhm.
like so is that like real stuff that happens? Like, because I think everyone looks at them and they're like, oh, they're so jelly-like and I can fry them up and eat them as calamari. But I'm like, they're so fascinating. Like the one, if I had to choose anything, Bigfoot, all that is
Mhm.
the Kraken. That's like the
Mhm.
one I'm most fascinated with because I think it's kind of true in a way. Like if you look at like pirates, like what they might have been thinking back then, imagine you're on a ship drinking all day and that's all you have is alcohol to drink. You don't really have a lot of food or water. I mean, you're going to end up over exaggerating some of these things, but the fact that these creatures exist, I mean, an octopus, for instance, can fit inside of a small bottle. Like they can get through
Right.
like keyhole sized objects. You're like, this thing is huge. That's fascinating.
Yeah, as long as they can fit their beak through it, they can get through it. So that's the beak is the only hard part in an octopus's body, and the rest they can just squish around. But in terms of the giant squid is real. It's
I know
it's
they
a
found a couple colossal ones.
Yes, so there's a giant squid and a colossal squid. The giant squid is a little bit longer, and a colossal squid is a little bit like chunkier, like they just have a thicker body. Um, but the whale interaction that you're talking about is with the sperm whale, and sperm whales are specialized to eat squid, and so they'll eat giant squid. And often you will see that the squid didn't go down without a fight. So there will be like little suction cup marks all over the whale's face, where the squid was clearly trying to not get eaten.
Yeah.
So that's a very real interaction. We find squid beaks inside of sperm whales' stomachs. Um, and then for like what sailors were seeing back in the day, there's a few different hypotheses on what that could be. Obviously, there are giant squid. They don't spend a lot of time at the surface of the water. They're deep sea critters, which is why we know so little about them. We only actually get their bodies once they're washed ashore, and then they're pretty damaged. Um, But when a squid starts to go downhill in health, they pump out a bunch of ammonia, which makes them float. So it's very possible that what sailors were seeing was a close to dying squid that was at the surface of the water and was just kind of like touching whatever was around it as it was about to die. There is one other hypothesis as to what sailors might have been seeing when they were seeing
I think I know where
very
you're going with it, and I didn't want to say it first.
yeah, when they were seeing very big appendages,
Yes,
um,
yes, yes,
come
yes,
out
yes.
of the water, that maybe these were actually whale penises that
That's
were
so fascinating to me because that's why I brought up the drinking thing. Imagine you're so drunk on a ship and you see something like that. You could totally mistake it. I just picture all these pirates with like their hands on their heads, like laying face down, like if they're getting arrested or something, just screaming, like, oh my God, we're going to die. There's a kraken. And it's not that at all. That's all right. Because this is what's interesting is that when you bring up the squid part, I go, to me, that seems like the most complicated animal, at least that I can think of, that you would study physiology wise on the aspect of it really doesn't have any bones. Like, for instance, with an arm,
Mhm.
like an elbow, this is a bone right here. It has a joint to it. So it can only bend one end of a certain amount of ways if you're not talking about like the shoulders going to rotate it and included, but it really kind of goes out, like stretched out, and it kind of comes up. It really can't do a whole lot other, like the side stuff starts to lead into the motion when it comes into the shoulder. So a squid doesn't really have, I don't know if it has bones, but it's free flowing. It's very hard to predict. Like if something like if you were to get into a fight with a squid, I know it wraps itself around you, but you don't know. Like it's so all over the place, like Jello, kind of in a way. It's very very hard to predict the motions that it has, which seems like it would be the most complicated one to kind of study in a way.
Yeah. So they don't have any bones. They're invertebrates. The octopus, the only hard part of its body is that beak. In the squid, they have the remnants of what was once an external shell in their body, and it's called a pen. And it's just this very, very thin little protein structure that runs through their body. So it provides a little bit of support, and then cuttlefish have a cuttle bone, which you might actually see like in the pet store around the bird supplies. They sell cuttle bones as a source of calcium for birds to nibble on, and it's a little bit more substantial than the pen in a squid. But all of these animals are what we call muscular hydrostats, which means all of the movement that's happening in their body, it's just due to them squishing their muscles around in different ways. So their arms have like infinite degrees of freedom. They can move in any way they want to, which has been of great interest to engineers and people in robotics, because if you can create something that has infinite degrees of freedom, that's really useful. So their movement has been studied a lot in terms of trying to figure out how you can replicate it. And there's some models that have gotten pretty close, but nature kind of trumps any anything we try to base off of it. So in terms of how they move, it really is fascinating. And our squid swim by using jet propulsion.
Yeah.
So this has been another area where engineers have been really interested in learning how they use their bodies. And it turns out they actually swim like really efficiently. For a long time, we thought they were probably inefficient animals, meaning they weren't really good at using their energy well. But it turns out that they actually are really efficient. And this makes sense. Squid have been around for 500 million years. So long before dinosaurs, anything like that, there were squid in the oceans. So they have pretty uh, a pretty robust life history here. They've been around a long time. They're clearly doing something right in order to have stuck around
Do you
through.
think that's also a factor of like the ocean as well too? Like it seems like
Mhm.
the deeper you go, time seems to move a little bit differently down there. I know we base time like for time zones, for instance, we base off just the direction of whatever the sun is in the sky. But if you look at, like, they found that 600 million-year-old dinosaur fish. It was a dino fish
Mhm.
documentary special on Netflix. It was the coelacanth, I think it was called. They
Oh
found
yeah,
this.
coelacanth. Yeah.
So you look at that, and then it's like they were wondering how it survived for so long. And it's like, because
Mhm.
time kind of moves differently the deeper in that deep, dark part of the ocean that we haven't really been able to discover. The no sense of light, you don't have no reference of what time it is. Divers go down there and they feel like we're going to go down for an hour. That's why they have watches on there too. Also, tell how deep they're going, but at the same time to know how long they've been underwater, because you can't tell. There's no direction of sunlight to be able to tell you it's starting to get night, or it's middle day, or anything of that sort, which I think
Yeah.
is interesting. Because I think when we talk about, like, the squid or an octopus, for instance, we say it's like the most fascinating. The reason That's probably a reason why people have conspiracy theories that it might have came from a different planet. I know there's that theory that goes out there because there's no other animal on this, like, world that really replicates what this thing can kind of do and the way that it moves and its body style, which I'm like, or is it the fact that there's still a large chunk of our ocean we haven't discovered, and there's probably other things down there that have similarities to that?
Yeah, people, it's fun to like hypothesize that these are aliens, but the reality is that our own Earth is capable of creating really fantastic creatures. You don't need to look much further than our our invertebrates in order to come up with a fantastic sci-fi plot line. Like
Yeah.
I it's yeah, there's a reason why cephalopods, this group of animals, is so heavily utilized for alien stories. But you're definitely right about deep ocean moving a little differently, and definitely in terms of like evolution. And that's because things don't change that much down there. Like it's really hard to change, say, the temperature or the acidity of that amount of water. And you're going to have less immediate inputs like streams and people in those areas. So animals can stay very much the same over long periods of time. For our squid and our octopus, they're not just deep sea critters. There's some that you'll be able to catch in like the Chesapeake Bay. If you go snorkeling down in the Caribbean, you'll probably see some big reef squid just hanging out down there. So they have really, really wide ranges of habitats. So some of these areas are being more immediately affected by other variables than others, for sure.
It's all their also their thinking matter too. A lot of people look at them like they might not have, like, a big brain to them. And maybe if we look at, maybe there are probably some out there that might have a small brain in comparison to the size of their body. I look at it like an octopus. I've seen videos of them cover themselves up with sand or dirt and camouflage themselves perfectly to where you wouldn't be able to even come across them unless they came out and showed themselves to you. There's animals out there that we have completely misunderstood. Is that part of the reason maybe why you've gotten into it a little bit too, like the squids and the octopuses?
Yeah, they are very intelligent animals. Animal intelligence is a tricky thing to study, to measure, and to talk about because we really want intelligence to look like our kind of intelligence. We want to see tool use and problem solving. And the reality is that different animals have different challenges, and being really good at being a squid is going to look different than being really good at being a person. So for our octopus, which is the one where intelligence has been studied the most, it turns out that a lot of their intelligence does look very human in that they do use tools. They'll grab coconut shells off of the ocean floor and tuck themselves inside of them and use them as protection. Um, and they can solve problems. They can solve mazes. They can be trained like a dog can to respond to certain stimuli. Um, so they are incredibly intelligent in that way. When it comes to their brains, their brain looks very different than a human, and many of the nerves that go into thinking are actually in the arms of an octopus. So it's just a completely different structure than a human, big old human noggin. Instead, we have these neurons that are just distributed throughout the entire animal's body that it's using to
Well, yeah,
think.
because the senses or the way that it perceives things is through its hands. Like a lot of like
Mhm,
for blind people, for instance, it's touching things to be able to figure out what these things are. It's kind of like with octopuses, they're not really using or squids, they're not really using their eyes to kind of see all this type of stuff. They're also using their hands to kind of feel out for things too. Like if it's a danger, if there's something I could put in my mouth, if it's kind of something of that sort, which I think is interesting because I always said if there's one sense I'd be afraid to lose would be my sense of touch because I have
mm,
ADHD. So if I rub my fingertips together, I feel more grounded knowing that I'm in this moment. I can feel this type of sense rather than focusing on, oh, I got a car payment, I got to pay gas, I got to do whatever the hell it is that goes on in your
mhm,
brain when you're future worrying about stuff. So that helps out in such a massive way. And people look at like sea creatures like I know people bring up the example dolphins are probably just like humans like the mind type ways, not necessarily. I think they're a whole other advanced set of creature. I think there's something that we basically have a small grasp of understanding of how far it really goes. I think it's the biggest example would be that they have different accents depending on
mhm,
different pods locations wherever parts they're from. Dolphins can speak in different clicks and different frequencies to be able to communicate with each other. It's like being from Baltimore and then being from New Jersey. New Jersey speaks with a twang to their accent. And then in Baltimore, when I say talking, I say it like that. You know, there's a different sound in the way that even though we're speaking English, it's the same dialect, but it's a different type of tone, a different accent to it, which dolphins have. They also use pufferfish to get
mhm.
high off of, which I'm like,
They
that's
do.
just nuts. I don't know why
Yeah.
people are like, let's go to Mars. I'm like, hang on a second. The ocean's pretty fascinating.
It's true, it's true. Yeah, no, they are incredible, and that intelligence can look so different, and it's important for people to remember that it doesn't have to look human in order for it to be really impressive.
I live in a beach town, so the most common thing that I've ever seen that people use as desktop wallpapers because they think it looks appealing is jellyfish.
Uh-huh.
Um, they're fascinating to me. I've been stung multiple times by them, mostly because I used to work in the water. So doing jet skis and stuff, you hop in at the wrong location, you come into a school of jellyfish, and they're not really forgiving when it comes to that point. Mostly it's probably my fault because I'm hitting the tentacles, but it's kind of hard when that's the thing. It's so hard to predict those things because there's no bones or anything to sense the movement of what a direction goes. If I swing my arm, like throw a right hook or something, you can tell it's going in the direction because of the bones. It gives an outline of where it's going to go. A squid, they have the tentacles for sure, but it's free flowing. Like we're talking about, a jellyfish is the exact same thing. When people are looking up in an aquarium tank and they're seeing a jellyfish floating through, they go, it's so magical. Yeah, because you can't predict it. Everything needs to be so finite in detail of what you need category you need to put it in and what specification is it. And I'm like, I like a lot of the mystery, but also the point of science is being able to classify things too. But just looking at something and people go like, well, it's because of this and this and this. And I'm like, I like that because then someone else is going to have a different opinion on that too, which makes it so much more fascinating that you can't put it in such a niche box. It's
Mm,
more than that. It's a little bit of something that we still don't even have a grasp on yet.
yeah, yeah. Our
I'm a thinker.
jellies, yeah. Yeah, our jellies are a little different than our squid. They're a little more, we'll use the word primitive, in terms of like nervous control and muscular control. They're still really good at being jellyfish, but our jellies don't even actually have a brain. Like they have what's called a nerve net. So it's the most primitive nervous system in the animal kingdom, where it's just enough for them to be able to pulse and swim, detect light and dark, and if they're upside down or right side up. But that's about it. That's the extent of our jellyfish brain.
Do you think maybe science has a bit of an issue when it comes to the fact that we base intelligence off of things that relate to what we were talking about, like our own intelligence, for instance, like things that we
Mhm.
can do, like a dog, for instance? I've had a couple of dogs throughout my life, and I had a theory when I was a kid. I was like, are they hearing the sounds that like the words that I'm saying when I say hello? Does it hear hello? Or does it just hear the frequency and the pitch my voice makes when I say the sound? Like when I go, hello, or like if I just do the noise like that, does my dog know or does it respond the same? It responds the exact same, even if I don't say the words, if I just make the noise. So it's like it's very interesting because like cats kind of seem like they have their own mindset when it comes to like they love you, sure. Like, but it's
Yeah.
also like if you're there, you can pet me type deal. A dog's like, I need you to survive. Like when you leave the house for 10 minutes to go get the mail, I'm losing my shit because I don't know if you're ever coming back. Like there's a
Mhm.
different mentality. And I think we base intelligence off of like chimps or something like that because they can relate a little bit more to our own rather than look at the vast amount of differences that there are out there with animals.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And so it's really tricky. It's tricky in the sciences and it's tricky as a non-scientist too to so much of so much of what goes with animal intelligence is often animal worth and people feeling that unintelligent animals aren't worthy of protection or resources and they matter less. So, our invertebrates, which is about 97% of all of the animals on the planet, they tend to get overlooked um, as creepy crawly things, and instead the more charismatic big mammals, our giant pandas and our elephants, they end up getting a whole lot of attention because people can relate to them more. At very least, they think they're adorable. But then our creepy crawlies, which actually make the world go round, they end up not getting the attention that they deserve.
I was at work and I'll never forget when someone goes, "Why did you let that spider outside?" Because I found a spider and I just picked it up, put it on my finger, and then put it outside and like let it go. That's not like, oh, he's so sweet. No, that's like I just didn't want to kill a spider. There's no point when they do kind of a whole lot. My only thing is that we have an agreement. When I'm in the shower, that's a spot where you do not go. You can go throughout the rest of the house, but that's kind of the spot there. But it's weird with hair, for instance. If it has too much hair, it depends on where it's at. A spider, for instance, if it has hair all over its legs and all that type of thing, it's very, very like it seems like scary in a type of way. But then
Mhm.
if you look at like eyebrows, for instance, people talk about like dogs, cats, all these types of things. Maybe we like them because they have eyebrows and cows don't have eyebrows. That's why they're farm animals. Someone brought this he has a podcast. It's all about the deep sea ocean. And he said that there's one type of fish that's harder to kill than all the others. And it's when fishermen pull up the dogfish. And it's because the dogfish has like what looks like eyebrows on it. So what happens is, as a defense mechanism, these people, they take a billy club to club the fish. And as they go to swing the thing up, the fish raises those eyebrows. And it's like that sense of like, are you thinking? Are you alive? And it's that little minute detail that gets people to halt from doing that, like finishing it and like clubbing
Mhm.
it. And it's
Mhm.
just, it's that was interesting to me because I never even thought of that. Like there's subtle differences that we just like when a dog dies in a movie. That's like, oh my God, a dog just died. It's a little bit different for some people when it's a cat. It's a little bit different for some people when it's a bird. It's a little bit different when it's something else because we value different animals' intelligence. I think, do you think that's on the basis of intelligence or just how close they are to us?
I think that one is complicated and a lot has to do with um perceived intelligence and societal value in terms of so we we treat animals very very differently in our society based on honestly not much criteria. So the difference between a dog and a pig is very minute, really. Pigs are incredibly intelligent. They're trainable. They will look you in the eye, um, but they've been deemed as a food. Whereas if you were to say you were going to go out and slaughter some dogs and fry up little slivers of them in a skillet, oh, people would, oh, they would lose it on you, right?
Yeah.
There's no difference. There's no difference between those animals and how the pain that they feel, the kind of suffering that they experience, no difference. But we've just decided as a society that we care less about how that pig feels. Um,
It's kind of like in
there,
some countries, cows, for instance, in like India, are seen as like ancestors. So they don't kill
yeah.
cows. It's a horrible thing to do. Like if you one gets hit by a car, which is tends to happen, there's people that'll pray by it and drop flowers by it. It's all how we look at it. Like some people eat dog on. That's just not in our country though. That's seen as a horrible act because we imagine if squid, for instance, we probably wouldn't eat squid if we had house pets of squids, but we also don't live in the ocean because sadly nobody wants to explore it that much.
Yeah, yeah, but it's so I actually have a little farm sanctuary that I run in addition to my academic pursuits
Perfect
where
segue. Did you like how I
yeah.
lined that up?
So it's small. My husband and I, we have two rescued donkeys, a horse, a collection of cats, some of which we chose, some which chose us. We have some chickens, and we're trying to grow some of our own food and just like really tend to this piece of land in a way that supports the ecosystems around it. We actually have a little family of turkeys that has joined us lately. It's so cool. It's a mom and a dad and seven baby turkeys that have decided our property is a safe place. And that brings me so much joy. And the parental care is so neat. It's always mom and dad on either side with all seven of the babies just waddling all around the place together. Um, I have in a pond where I've let the trees just completely grow up around it, and like it's not even accessible to me now, which is cool because it's a great place for frogs to breed. And in the spring, you can hear all the peepers singing. So it's I've set aside parts of our land that are not meant to be seen. I mean, they're not meant to be like beautiful by human standards of, well kept and sprayed down. I've let everything grow up in a way that actually um, our critters can enjoy in different ways. So um, the point of the farm is to like provide a soft landing to animals that need it, and to also uh, try and be like a living example of how we feel like we should care for animals and the earth. So we don't eat meat. I'm like 90% vegan. If I'm traveling, it's so hard. Sometimes I'll eat some cheese, but when I cook at home, I don't cook with any meat or dairy. And that's because the way that we farm animals in this country
It's horrible.
it's abysmal. So 99% of the meat that Americans eat is through factory farming. And when I say factory farming, I'm not talking about like your nice local farmer who has cows out on their property that they slaughter a few per year. No, we're talking about like mass buildings stuffed full of animals that are in terrible living conditions, that are suffering, that are pumped full of antibiotics because they're not healthy, and they just need to get them to slaughter before they die. Um, so, and this is like one of the biggest environmental um, issues that we have on hand. I mean, it all rolls back to animal agriculture in my eyes.
There's definitely a fix for it. You're not gonna get, at least the way a lot of the vegans talk about, and I'm not a meat eater either. I'm a fish guy. So
Mhm.
I live in a beach town. If you're gonna ask, like, do you want a burger? That's like $10. No way. $1 is a can of tuna. I'm good with that at any time. I don't care. That's perfect food for me. But the way to get the fix to happen when it comes to the way that I always tell people, before you even decide to eat chicken, before you even decide to go like eat meat, go to one of the factories. I've been to the factories. I've seen how it's done, and it's horrible stuff. Even watch a video online, because you're going to use
Yeah.
less immediately when you start to see what goes into it. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of chickens that get killed on a Super Bowl Sunday, two chicken wings is one chicken, and most people take down 10 or 14. And when like a million or something people are doing that, that's a lot of chickens. So I'm thinking there's like a shed of like all over like one part of like one giant state that just has sheds upon sheds of chickens that are
Mhm.
stacked up on top of each other.
Yeah.
I think the way to get people to change is to you got to think of the long haul. And the long haul is you got to slowly wean people off and get them like, you don't need to eat meat every single meal. Maybe incorporate one meal with it and then find like more of a vegetable as a side. It's vegetables aren't bad. The people that complain about
Mhm.
vegetables being like the worst thing, like they choke on a thing of broccoli. I'm like, there's plenty of other ones you can find that a grapefruit. Fruits I have problems with because I like fruit, but a grapefruit or an avocado, that's just
Yeah.
too much. No, thank you.
That's really I've got my snacks right here.
Oh my goodness gracious. I can't do the avocado. I don't trust a fruit that or a vegetable, whatever you want to call it. They has to be cut a certain time of day. And if you miss it by that 1 second, it goes bad. That's
Uh,
just an avocado to me. But I mean, there's plenty of good. I eat vegetables almost every single meal. I
yeah.
mean, I only eat like a can of tuna a day. So I have to, make most of it salads and stuff of that sort too. But it's not hard to eat healthy. It's just the system industry has been running off of an industry like farming industry produced all meat everything of this sort for so long that now it's so cheap to do. And that's the most sale. I mean, if you go
Mhm.
anywhere, vegetables aren't super expensive, but also it's not what's programmed that people have been eating for so long to eat. And I'm like, there's a slow change. It's going to take a couple generations, sure, but it's just going to have to try and wean it off of the meat thing slowly but surely, getting it to such a low point where we're not going to have to worry about all these giant farms. And if you know,
Mhm.
whatever chicken plant or something, like they had that contaminated chicken plant that happened, and then they
Yeah.
had to recall all this chicken because it was contaminated with something. I was like, we won't ever have to have instances of that happening again if we had more of a vegetable base or more of even a
Mhm.
sea based. I love the sea. I respect it so much. I live in a beach town. You kind of have to, but
Mhm.
everything that comes out of it, I like. It's pretty good. I haven't
Mhm.
found one thing where I'm like, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
But it's also a factor of wastefulness. I mean, the
Mhm.
world wastes more than it needs. I think when we talk about value, for instance, when you were mentioning your sanctuary, you said it's not good to human standards or people's maybe perception of what beauty is. You let things grow
Mhm.
out. Wouldn't the value, at least the way I look at it, is the value of an ecosystem or a habitat that's running functionally, a place where, like you said, turkeys coming in that can have like a home, they look at that as like a home now. I'm like, that seems like that's worthwhile and value to them, a place where they don't
Mhm.
have to worry. I mean, we have ospreys around here that people don't really know what those are. They get taken down the nest all the time, to the point where when I worked at doing jet skis, they went out to the light posts out there where there was no way you could build anything out there. People would go
Yeah.
by and take pictures, and they just have their nest there because no one's going to touch it.
Yeah.
It's a light post out in the middle of the ocean. It's horrible if a storm comes, but it's the only place they can find safe. We have natural reservations down here that people abuse the shit out of. They want to have bonfires on the beach and stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
like, look, man, I get it. There's a section where you can do that, but there's also a little bit something important. When I get to see my nephew stare at a horse that he's never seen before, a wild pony that's just
Yeah.
walking around. And I'm like, that's when you see the eyes light up, that's something where I'm like, I feel like everybody should be like that with at least something in nature.
Yeah. Wait, what beach town are you in?
I live in Ocean City, Maryland.
Oh, okay. Cool. I'm from DC originally.
Okay, so that well, I mean, it's a couple hours away, but you know
Yeah.
Ocean City, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. It's a nice place at times. Other times it's like
Yeah.
right now it's summer season, so we got tourists, and that's where
Yeah.
I just look at it. It's like you want it to come because it brings money to the town, but
Mhm.
then you see how horrible it is when they're here, and it's like they leave it. I mean, I get it. They're kids my age, and a lot of them don't think like environmentally friendly. I'm not
Mhm.
environmentally friendly like when it comes to like recycling plastic bottles. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
I don't do that. But I also try and use like one bottle. I try and use as least as I possibly can. I try not to use
Yeah.
more than I need. And I think that's a great start to something there. You're not going to be able to get the whole world to recycle, but just saying, hey, do you really need that extra this? Do you need that extra that? People go, yeah, I could probably do without it. That little small thing building up can create a lot of change.
Yeah, and honestly, our recycling system is so very broken around the world that the emphasis really should be on reducing instead of recycling. Like single-use plastics are abysmal and we don't need them. Plastic bottles don't need those. But the way I don't know enough to really talk at length about it, but we were selling our recyclables to China for a while. They're no longer accepting them. So it's recycling in and of itself is a really flawed system in a lot of ways, but if you can reduce what you use, like zero waste has gotten the idea of it has gotten trendier and trendier over the past few years, and it's really hard, if not impossible, to live a literal zero waste life. But if you can take some of those concepts and apply them throughout your life, you could end up, I mean, it makes a big difference. Like I have a set of reusable bags that I use every time I go grocery shopping. I probably save about 10 plastic bags each time I do that. So if I go grocery shopping, you know, 3, 4 times a month now is 30, 40 bags. It adds up. And I have a Keurig, which I know is, I know real coffee people will snub their nose at that, but I have little reusable filters, so I don't use the Keurig
What's
cups every time.
what's real coffee? Like, I don't get when people say that, they go like, huh, you don't go to Starbucks. I'm like, dude, I great value coffee from Walmart, and then I just put it in a thing. I put whatever coffee syrup in it. It's coffee's coffee to me. Maybe the taste might be different, but
Yeah.
I used to do like the Starbucks thing when I was like in high school, and then I figured out how many calories is in a Java chip. it's 1,000 something. I was like,
Yeah.
good God. Like, I'm a fitness guy. That's nuts to me. That's no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Um, but I think it's weird the way that the world works is that the one that hurts mostly for the earth is probably the easiest way to produce. And that's only because we've been doing it in that way so long that we've perfected the method to do so. The one
Mhm.
you would see, like if somebody was going to pitch you the plan before this whole entire industry got made, they say, we
Mhm.
have this way, it's going to, it looks more appealing. It's not a brown bag. It's a
Mhm.
plastic bag. And actually, it looks great. Your logo shines great on it, but it's going to be worse for the earth. But then we got this
Right.
brown bag that's kind of bulky. It's kind of weird. It doesn't really morph around the things like an octopus would or a or
Mhm.
squid would around a predator or around something. But we have this brown bag that just kind of sits there. You set your items in it. Which one
Yeah.
do you want? I mean, they're both the same price. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
let's do the paper bag one. Eventually, after a while, they got it so down to a science where we've made it cheap as hell to do
Mhm.
so. And now
Yeah.
the brown bag's expensive. Our town actually eliminated the plastic bag thing and they brought it back 3 weeks later because they're like, no way in hell. The brown bag thing is just too much. And I'm like, it's because you're conditioned to the plastic bag thing. That's when you see some guy go, that's okay. I got my own bags. I'm like, oh, he's above the rest. He just comes out with these like giant like satchel and puts it on the table. He goes, it holds cold stuff too. And he puts his
Yeah.
ice cream in there.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, we've made it really easy to do a lot of very wrong things in our society. Factory farming falls in that category as well. This isn't the way that our ancestors ate. This isn't the way that our great grandparents ate, where meat was available, 3 days a week or three meals a day. And people often eat meat 3 meals a day. But you mentioned you were a fitness guy, like if interest in climate change doesn't do it for you, if and there's huge data sets to support that animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of climate change, if not the leading cause of climate change. The animal ethics component of it, seeing animals shoved in tiny cages, doesn't do it for you. Maybe the health benefits will do
It's
it for you.
It's one of many, I'd say. I wouldn't I mean, it might be leading a little bit more than the others, but I said there's multitude of factors that boil down to our atmosphere. And the fact that Bill Gates is trying to send a missile into our atmosphere to dissipate particles to also dim the sun is also pretty interesting as well, too.
Yeah, but these are all incredibly expensive, high-tech ways to solve an issue that it we can solve by changing our diet.
Well, so much of our trash, instead of burning it, gets put onto an island. And that
Yeah.
thing ends up leading into our oceans where you find something that has something around its neck and you see a horrible sea turtle video.
Mhm.
There's probably another way to help change this whole entire instead of burning it, instead of putting it on an island. There's a way to get rid of it, but nobody's putting the essential time into it because right now it's pushing it under the carpet. It's a hell of a lot easier doing that. My whole thing is time. We're in a People can say like, oh, like we can sit here and talk about that the industry is horrible, which it is, but
Mhm.
it's also we're in a country that's a couple hundred years old, and the fact that this thing is at such a fast pace, moving, trying to progress faster and faster, and not focusing on key principles and building a stronger foundation that we're not really focused on anymore. We got the roots, we borrowed. This is like you mentioned China before. We borrow a lot of crap from other countries, and it's really not good for us. We need to worry about the long game. Japan's history is 5,000 years old. They didn't get to where they're at, the place that they're standing now, on the basis of working as fast as possible. And the
Mhm.
fact that we're a couple hundred years old and we're competing at the top, it's like, look, we need to start working on slowing down a little bit, not worry about the number one spot and work on the long game. How are we going to make this place sustainable for future generations? Because the way I'm looking at it, it's like we're running in a really weird system. And it's a product of many factors. It's a product
Mhm.
of all these people yell at McDonald's how horrible they are. It's a person that didn't care about the people after them. If I offer you right now to get $1 billion and be rich and take care of your whole entire family, your whole entire life, all the animals that you have,
Mhm.
but it's going to affect future generations. Most of the people that are hearing that about caring about their family and the people that they know, it's very, very hard to care about the people that aren't existing yet or you don't see their face, you don't know their name. It's like when I went to medical court to deal with John Hopkins and I eventually won. The judge explained it best to me. They're looking on a piece of paper and they see your name. That's what makes it easy for them to say no, even though you might need it. And
Mhm.
that's kind of how the system is. It's a bunch of people that are really a little bit selfish. They're kind of worrying about themselves and they might do
Yeah.
benefits or they might do organizations, but nobody ever really cares about the person behind them. And that's why the millennial generation is getting a lot of crap too, is because they care about everything they're trying to reverse, because everything in our society now is like, holy crap, we made a mistake. Let's try and 180 this. And they're trying to get all these kids into it, and they're becoming so involved into it. You probably see it with some of the students too, wanting to, support and do all these causes and stuff. It's because for so long, nobody's been doing anything. And it's like now they got all this time they're trying to make up for, which is why they have to act and do all these crazy things and, do as much as they possibly can to stop this inevitable downfall of a civilization, which I don't think it's just us. I think it's every country has their issues. I mean,
Sure.
most of the states over here, especially, is because we are trying to keep being number one. And sadly, when you're at number one, the way we've done it is you got to cheat and you got to do some things to get there. And if that comes from borrowing money, if that comes from contaminating somebody's water in their house, I mean, Florida, they had a sewage overfill problem where they were literally got it into their water. Like
Yeah.
that's might be local government issues, but still nobody gets to hear about those types of things. There's a lot that's going on. And like, especially if, like, for instance, you study, this specific area, but I think from just talking to you, you have a compassion for the world as much as I probably do too, maybe even more. There's a sense of not only just caring about people, not only just caring about animals, but also caring about the thing that gives you air, the thing that gives you water, the thing that you were sustaining that you would call home. You think that would wake a lot of people up, but a lot of people go, I'm not going to be the change. And that's kind of like the big thing that sticks in everybody's mind is like, yeah, you as a person can actually add up a small fraction of what leads into an eventual global change if everybody acts the same way. But it's like nobody's going to listen and do exactly what I do. It's like you keep thinking like that, then yeah, nobody's going to follow.
Yeah, and it's, you for me, I've gone through different phases throughout my life in this, and now as a professor, and as someone who's really active on social media as well, I have a platform, both virtual and in person, where I get an audience where I get to talk about these things, and I hope to not just talk about them, but show them through how I live my life that it matters and that there's actually actionable things that you can do to make a difference. You mentioned this banner behind me here. It says Seeds of Lenore Rhine, and this is a student group that I run on campus. And the goal is to engage our students with sustainability and with environmental issues. And it was originally for just our science majors, and it's rolled into something much, much bigger where I have probably 120 people on our roster now, most of which are non-scientists who are interested in learning about these things and learning how they can make a difference, the different choices that they can make that matter, and learn some skills to help them live a little bit differently and to pass that on. So it's these things snowball when one person starts talking about it. It can snowball beyond what you ever thought. And I think that walking the walk is the most crucial thing you could do here, because you can talk all day long about how things are terrible and bad, but if all you do is talk about it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But there are actionable things that can be done in order to make a difference.
I look at, I'm not going to be able to change anybody with anything that I say. I can say how I feel, I can say the thoughts that I have, but I work on my own life too. I do as much as I possibly can to make sure I'm not leaving a horrible trail of hell behind me. And at least with people that I know and I talk to, they pick up on some of the things that I do. And that's all it takes is a small change. I mean, I was mentioning, we talk about like the value of everything. The value of the people are going to care about the earth when they don't even care about themselves. I mean, the
Mhm.
fact is, like the biomechanical engineer I was telling you about, her name is Melissa Boswell. She told me, she goes, people just don't care. Like you tell them they're going to have scoliosis, or they're going to tell them they're going to have a spinal issue or something. They don't worry about it. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I mean, there's sometimes I'm like, I don't want to sit up straight. It's hard to sit up
Mhm.
straight after a while, especially if you're sitting or something. And it's 100% true, just the value of stuff too. But I think you're going to see a turnaround in a lot of it. I think a lot of people are waking up because it's very, very hard. I mean, this article I saw got reposted. The Arctic, the ground level temperature was 118 degrees a couple of days ago. That's nuts.
Yeah.
That's where there's nothing but snow. So it's like, hey,
Yeah.
that's 118. I mean, it was 50, no, 52 degrees this morning. It's 73 right now, as my computer's telling me. And I'm like,
Mhm,
okay, there's something going on here where it's June and it might feel like it's like a fall or something like that.
mhm,
Like the weather's shifting, a lot of stuff's going on, but everyone's like, oh, it's okay. We'll just go. I mean, we're going to Mars. We'll eventually be able to live on another planet. I'm like, all right, I get that. If you want to live on another planet, go ahead. But I would
yeah,
like to stay on this one because I actually enjoy where I live. There are moments where you sit outside, like I'll be doing after this podcast. I'll be sitting outside soaking up some sun because the air smells nice. I like the smell of the air. Where I'm at, it's not polluted so much where I'm actually able to still smell the air. I could smell flowers. There's honeysuckles. I haven't seen those in
mhm,
forever. I'm like, even if I'm an idiot trying to get honey out of a flower, it's stuff you're supposed to do when you're a kid as well too, and you're supposed to enjoy these moments, but everyone's kind of sitting inside playing technology. And that's where I talk about this a little bit too. I've talked to 800 and something people. I'm at 800 something. Everyone thinks around the same basis of this stuff, but there's a lot more of like talking about it, like you're saying, and then doing it as well too. Like
mhm,
I would go nuts. Like I could talk video games all day, but I don't play them. That's too much of a time suck for me. There's moments in my life that I think people should be experiencing as well too. And if that's doing video games, sure. If it makes you happy, I think that's what everybody's trying to do is that life right now is a little bit hard. And when I mean
mhm,
that, that's not a factor of like, you know, us. It's just the world is very difficult to survive right now. It's not like what it used to be back in the day. Mental health is on the rise. There's so much that's not being fixed. And this is when I talk about worry about our foundation. You're
mhm,
not going to have people that are going to want to live here and care about other people if you don't give them a place that they want to live in. It's as simple as that.
mhm. Yeah, unfortunately, what we're seeing is a result of that line of thinking where like we're now beyond the moment where we can be like, oh, pretty soon we're gonna see terrible things happening. Like terrible things are happening now. We're living through the moment. We just lived through a pandemic, which is absolutely reflective of um our environmental situation now. We're seeing wildfires in California out of control. Last year, Australia was on fire. We're seeing multiple hurricanes hitting the same areas at the same time, droughts and floods. These are all products of how we've cared for our earth. And we are unfortunately going to live through this. And um, well, hopefully we will live through this. As a species, we'll see.
I
It's
think we'll be okay.
honestly, if you talk about it in long term, in geological time, we won't be okay.
In a thousand
Maybe
years from now or so, no, there's not going to probably be a human species left. And
yeah.
I think that's our own doing, though, not just environmental.
Mhm,
Nobody talks about the fertilization count in people has dropped from 1997 when they tested it was at 97%. So our great grandparents to no, not our great grandparents, our grandparents, our sperm count from 97% to now where it's at now, where they tested it, I think it was in 2011, was at 50 something or 47% or something like
mm,
that. It's dropping. Your people are having it's harder for them to have kids, and that's from our use of plastics.
mhm,
That's the craziest thing is like I think that's going to be the eventual end for people is you make people sterile. You
mhm,
make your and people don't give a shit. I mean, it's so hard because everything is plastic or aluminum or it's tin or
yeah,
it's so hard. If you say I'm not going to use plastics anymore, you're still going to use it. That's the issue is everything from your soap bottles, from this, you could reduce it as much as possible, but you just got to find a way to take that factor out and put something in. Nobody liked wearing masks when it first started, and now we're
mhm,
all kind of used to it. And then my town doesn't do it anymore, but now it's weird because the very first day that it happened, like when there was no masks, it was like you wanted to put one up. You were reflexing like you were doing it. It
yeah,
took a year to get it programmed to that. How
sure.
long does it take to get the plastic thing done? It might take longer than a year, but it's doable. It's not impossible.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that will be hitting on more on some big corporations and how they choose to package their material, um, along with individual choice.
It's the
Um,
people. The people got to make a stand on this too. The issue
mhm,
is that whenever we get on the like, oh God, I'm gonna bring them up because I hate them so much. PETA.
uh-huh,
What
yeah,
are you doing, PETA? I don't get it. It's like there's so much going on that you should be focused on and you're not doing it. You banned animal slurs. I don't I'm sorry. I don't find that fun. I don't find that it's funny to laugh at. 100%, I'll crack a joke on it, but that's horrible that's what they consider successful. I
Yeah.
don't get that considered successful when you have all these problems that are going on where I'm like, yo, if Pete is listening, 1 month, let me run it. Let me just run it. I will do so much more than you've done in your whole entire organizational lifetime. Getting animal crackers in 2013 out from
Yeah.
behind bars when
Yeah. I completely agree. As someone who like agrees with many of the things that they say they stand for, I hate PETA as well. I think they're the silliest organization, and I think they're harmful. I think that if more people talk to I would love to think that if more people talk to people like me who's like, yeah, I'm 90% vegan. Sometimes I eat some cheese because it's whatever.
jeez.
And versus PETA, where it's like, naked celebrities laying
Let me throw
on,
red paint on you, that type of
yeah,
thing.
and it's like that's not helpful, and it characterizes us as silly, trivial people, the people who care about animal rights, who care about animal protections. And it's just like I totally would distance myself from them as far as I possibly could.
As much I think the only reason I've ever, like, got mad at vegans is the way that some of them act, I think is what we're talking about, like, the red paint and, like, the one that's like, "You're a piece of crap if you do it," and I'm like, "That's not how you're going to get anybody to change on anything," and I make fun of the meat community too. That's the funny part is I'm not in a side here. I'm just looking at it from the other person's perspective. It's that's the issue is that there's not really a whole lot of talking going on. And I've talked to everyone from every single side, whether you want to talk about political parties or whether you want to talk about food choices, whether you want to talk about sciences, people that believe in astrology, then people that do the astrophysics. I've talked to it the whole spectrum. And everybody has a common principles, but then it's not looking at the other perspective is the issue that goes on. I'm like, if you can understand another perspective, imagine if someone comes into your home and throws trash everywhere around your house. You're going to see the perspective from a fish when you're throwing trash into the water. That's a big thing. A part of Ocean City is like taking care of, like, make sure you only leave only your footprints. That's their
Mhm,
motto. Like,
mhm.
you don't want to leave cigarette butts. You want to leave any of this type of stuff. I mean, I got hit by a saw, like a hand saw, like
Yeah.
you saw wood in the ocean when I was like 17. I got hit with
Oh,
a rusty saw in my foot. And I'm like,
oh.
where is this at? There's sprinklers out there. There's people that dump stuff out there. And I'm like, look, that's one thing where it's not that big of an issue to walk 5 feet over to a trash can. And then a thought goes into my head. Imagine if that person has anxiety and there's a bunch of people by the trash can. I'm like, then you got to find another trash can. I don't know, but it's
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
it's so easy not to litter, but you'll still drive and you'll come across a bunch of people that have thrown cans out of the window into someone's yard. I have a bag in my car to be able to put all my trash in. Yeah, I still use plastic bags, but I try not to use more than I need. I don't double bag
Mhm,
everything. I
mhm.
put as much as I can in one bag and then I carry it to my car. And if it rips, that's my own dumb doing. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. Conversations are good. If people could meet in the middle and actually listen to each other, I think we'd get a whole lot further. Again, I'm lucky that I have the platform that I do to have these conversations both in the classroom, and I don't tend to have a I every now and again get like a bug up my butt and I'll say something online about diet. Um, the only reason honestly, it's incredibly important to me. It feels like the most important decision that I make at least 3 times a day is what I eat and how, that impacts the environment. And the only reason I don't talk about it more online is because that doesn't it's not a good place for conversation. Twitter is not a place for conversation. Twitter is a place where people put their comments and leave.
That's why I'm so quick with my messages. I only say like a one word thing or a one sentence thing, like, hey, want to do a
Yeah.
podcast? Sure. Because I need to talk to you rather than try and message you because then something's going to get confused. I
Mhm,
think like you said, the issue with diet, my only issue is if someone's trying to change their life and make their life better by trying to get healthier, they
mhm,
still continue to eat junk, is when I start to get pissed off because I'm like,
mhm,
you're asking for my help and then you're blaming yourself and making yourself feel like crap when you got to pull yourself out of the thing to do so. I was a
mhm.
chubby kid growing up, but I joined a gym and I've been going every day for 9 years. Like I don't like I you don't have to go that much, But also, like when I work at a gym too. So
Mhm.
when I'm working, I see people coming in there to try and change their life and stuff and trying to make their life better. They're overweight and they're trying to work out. That's hard. It's so hard to get into shape
Yeah.
because you start to notice like why you start to feel bad about yourself, the mental stuff, the physical stuff, the complications you do. I get issues when I see people that just come to the gym with makeup on and they just want to show off what they got. I get it. You're happy with what you got, but we also live by a beach. You can do that there too. All
Yeah.
you're doing is making people that are trying to make themselves feel better feel worse about themselves. My Twitter is I'll crack a joke. I'll post an episode and then I might tweet something political because you brought up China and I have so many issues with China. But not in this episode. I won't talk about it, but there's just so much that everyone is like, especially academics, it's all getting political now. There are so
Sure.
many times I'll invite someone on, and much like probably you getting a random DM for me was like, what does this kid want? Did he see something I said? What is it about? It's so hard to ask for a genuine conversation where it's like it's not an interview. It's
Mhm.
literally it's I'm talking to you as a person. I want to get your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. It's simple to say, but it's so much harder because it doesn't happen
Mhm.
everywhere. Like I'm 23. I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this for fame. I don't care. I just want to
Mhm.
talk to interesting people and hopefully if make a friend along the way.
I think that's amazing.
It'd be easier if everybody thought that way. Holy crap. You know how easy the world would be if people just asked, like, what happens if aliens existed? I'm like, yes, let's go down that rabbit hole. Why are we worried about the Trump thing? Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reality is many of the little tangents that we wanna go on come back around to some important issue.
That's my show.
It's
People are
yeah.
like, you did a great segue. I was like, it was not intended. It just
Yeah.
magically did the whole 180 back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is great. This is
But
great.
Carly, where can people find all your links as well too, where people can also see some of the work that you have?
I am most active on Twitter. My handle's biology Carly. I can also let me put my
I'm gonna link everything in the description too, but it just
okay,
helps if
great.
people can say like, hey, there's this
Oops.
place.
Yeah, and my website is kept pretty up to date with the things that I have going on.
I see it in the chat. So that's Carly Ann York Hey, you're on Wix too.
You know, it's great. And I have the free one.
I do too.
It's
I
it's
don't
great.
mind if it says Wix. I just wish they didn't put my freaking email name in there. So when you
Oh.
click on my thing, it's not out of the blank. It's the Rasta Rob as my
Ah,
email. So it's like,
gotcha.
well, hey, he's got a podcast called Out of the Blank, but his Wix site is Rasta Rob. And I'm like, hey man, I don't know what to tell you. I'm too lazy to change it either.
Gotcha.
It's
Yeah,
already
no, it's
hard getting guests. I'm not trying to get all professional with it. Like I don't use my email either.
fair enough.
But
So yeah.
I'll link that all in there too. Is there anything you want to say to anybody out there listening?
Um whenever I do podcasts, they always want a final thought and I always blank, but
Out of the blank.
out of the blank.
The show.
Yeah.
Is that what you thought when you saw the name? Or what you all right? I want your honest thoughts when I sent you a message. What'd you think? You can be
Honestly,
hurtful.
didn't think about it much.
Damn, that hurts too.
It's just like, okay, sure, sure. I've done a number of podcasts now with like a range of different kinds of names and topics, and I guess I've done enough now that I don't think very hard about any of it, and I'm just like, what do you want to talk about? Nothing? Fine. Okay, let's go. So
That's like my whole kit and caboodle. Um,
yeah.
I'd love to have you back on, Carly, if you'd like to come back on, but it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been interesting. Probably going to end up having more questions about squids later.
Sounds great. I'm here
Because
for it.
I'll probably message you about some squid stuff because
Yeah.
I'm so happy you mentioned the whale thing because I was gonna say it, but I was like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know if she wants me to say that. I don't know, but I did.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
I'm a biologist. I'm fine with whale penises. So all good.
And that's what we're ending on. Thanks everybody for listening.